The old car rattled under the late October rain, streetlights smeared across the wet windshield in broken streaks. Inside the cramped cabin, Emily Carter hunched forward, her hands clenched tight on the steering wheel as a violent contraction ripped through her abdomen. Sweat mixed with rain, dripping down her pale face. She unlocked her phone, the cold blue glow washing over her ghostly skin. Her trembling fingers tapped quickly. "I can't take it anymore. I'm alone, and I'm about to give birth." Emily hit send before her rational mind could stop her. A second later, she flung the phone onto the passenger seat, as if trying to escape the weakness she had just revealed. Rain hammered against the windshield. The road to the hospital had never felt longer. Every wave of pain threatened to choke her breath. 28 years old, single, and in just minutes, she would be a mother. Ryan Miller, the name flickered in her mind. The man who once promised to stay, who once said he would never leave, had vanished as if he never existed. He walked out when she was 3 months pregnant, leaving Emily with a swelling belly and an empty heart. She still kept his number in her contacts, clinging to some desperate fragment of hope. But Emily didn't know. In her panic, the desperate message hadn't gone to Ryan. It had gone to someone else. Alexander Grant, the cold, untouchable CEO of Grant Media, the company where Emily worked as a junior editor. A man in his 40s, living in a world far above hers. A man she never thought would glimpse her private life. Across the city, high above the glass towers, Alexander sat reviewing financial reports. A glass of whiskey glowed amber beside him, the warm light casting sharp edges across his calm, steely face. His phone buzzed. A short message appeared, heavy as lead. "I can't take it anymore. I'm alone, and I'm about to give birth." He frowned, staring. The number was unfamiliar, but the name beneath it, Emily Carter, was not. The young editor has been with the company for less than a year. He knew her only through immaculate draft revisions, a few passing nods in the hallway, never once realizing she was pregnant. Alexander froze. His chest tightened with a sensation he rarely allowed. Worry. A woman, his employee, was crying out in desperation. He gripped the phone, staring at the words as though they held some hidden truth. And for the first time in years, Alexander Grant faced a choice that had nothing to do with contracts or profit, but with his heart. Meanwhile, Emily reached the hospital parking lot. A contraction slammed through her, nearly knocking her against the wheel. She clutched her belly, forcing herself step by step through the emergency entrance. There was no time for hope, no one left to wait for. The delivery room doors shut behind her, cutting her off from the outside world. In her mind, only one thought repeated, "I have to do this alone. I only have myself." But she didn't know that somewhere across the rain-soaked city, Alexander Grant had thrown on a coat, grabbed his car keys, and sped into the storm, determined to find her. The rain pierced the Boston night like icy needles. Neon lights blurred on the slick streets, cars sparse, leaving tangled ribbons of light across the asphalt. Inside a sleek black car, Alexander Grant gripped the steering wheel. His tailored black suit was immaculate, his tie slightly askew, but his eyes no longer carried the calm of a powerful CEO. Instead, they burned with tension, as if each passing second could steal away a life. The phone screen glowed on the passenger seat. That short, desperate message still lingered, haunting and urgent. "I can't take it anymore. I'm alone, and I'm about to give birth." Alexander rarely concerned himself with the private lives of his employees. But this time, one name, one young woman he only knew through work, had made him abandon everything. Financial reports, unsigned contracts, urgent calls from the board. He was driving through the storm to find Emily Carter. In the driver's seat, old memories crashed back. A hospital. A machine is beeping frantically. The face of the woman he loved most. His wife, lost in childbirth. The child who lived only for a few hours before his world collapsed into silence. He had buried himself in work ever since, chiseling himself into stone. But this message, it was too close, too similar to a cry for help he had once prayed to hear, a cry that might have changed everything. "Not again," he muttered, eyes glinting cold against the streaming streetlights. "Not this time. I won't look away." Meanwhile, inside the delivery ward at Boston Memorial, Emily writhed under violent contractions. Fear flooded her veins. Doctors and nurses rushed around, voices sharp and urgent, lights blinding white. She bit her lip until it bled, tears mixing with sweat on the pillow. No hand to hold, no voice to remind her she wasn't alone. At that exact moment, the reception desk heard a deep, steady voice. "Excuse me, I'm looking for patient Emily Carter. I'm family." The receptionist looked up to see a tall man, rain-soaked suit clinging to broad shoulders, silver threading his hair, his face stern but his eyes blazing with resolve. She hesitated. "Are you her husband?" Alexander paused, the word husband sliced into old scars, but he nodded without hesitation. "Yes, I'm family. I need to see her." As Alexander strode down the corridor toward the delivery room, his heart pounded with unfamiliar urgency. For the first time in years, he wasn't walking into a boardroom, wasn't facing numbers or rivals, but stepping into the fragile, perilous world of a woman fighting alone on the edge of life and death. He stopped before the white door, the faint cries echoing through. Somewhere deep inside, Alexander felt an invisible thread pulling him closer, not just toward Emily Carter, but toward the child not his own, yet one that could change him forever. A pure, piercing cry shattered the heavy air of the delivery room. Emily, drenched in sweat, eyes swollen and red, exhausted but still clinging to consciousness, turned her head toward the nurse carrying the baby closer. "Congratulations, a healthy baby girl," the doctor smiled. Emily's trembling hands lifted her child, fragile yet determined. Her voice broke into a whisper. "Chloe." "Hello, my love." Tears mixed with her smile. It was the sacred moment she should never have had to face alone. Yet around her, there were only doctors, nurses, no familiar presence. The door creaked open. A tall figure entered, black suit still soaked from rain, tie loosened. Emily looked up, her breath catching in shock. "Alexander Grant." "Mr. Grant?" Her voice was hoarse, disbelief trembling on her lips. Alexander didn't answer immediately. He stepped inside, eyes flickering as he took in the fragile young woman, pale-faced but clutching a newborn with all her strength. In that instant, the icy mask he had worn for years cracked. He moved closer, his voice unexpectedly warm, resonant. "Are you all right, Emily?" Emily wanted to question him, to demand why he was there. But another shudder rolled through her body, and all she could do was cling tighter to baby Chloe's bassinet. Then something she could never have imagined happened. Alexander reached forward, steadying the small cradle as it wobbled. He gazed down at the baby, eyes sealed shut, cheeks flushed, pink, tiny fists twitching within a white blanket. Alexander swallowed hard. The sensation in his chest was achingly familiar, sharp with buried pain. One of the nurses glanced over and smiled. "Ah, your husband's here at last." "We worried when he wasn't around for the birth." Emily froze, words rushing to her lips. But before she could speak, Alexander gave a subtle nod, his face astonishingly calm. "Yes, I'm here." The room fell into silence. Emily turned to him, confusion swirling in her tearful eyes. Why would you do that?" Alexander looked at her, his gaze softened, and replied quietly, "Because no one should be alone in this moment." Emily's throat closed. The answer was simple, yet it shattered the walls she had built around her heart for 9 long months. She turned her face away, not wanting him to see her tears, but her arms clutched Chloe tighter, the other hand gripping the blanket like a lifeline, clinging to the unexpected warmth fate had sent her, in the form of a CEO she had never dared to approach. And as Alexander stood there silent, watching the scene unfold before him, he felt, perhaps for the first time in years, that a new chance had just begun. Winter sunlight filtered through the hospital window, casting the room in a soft, gentle glow. Emily sat on the bed, her hair disheveled, arms cradling baby Chloe, who slept peacefully. Dark circles shadowed her eyes after sleepless nights, yet the faint smile on her lips carried both exhaustion and joy. The door opened quietly. Emily looked up, expecting a nurse. But instead, Alexander Grant stepped in, one hand carrying a paper bag from an upscale restaurant, the other holding a bouquet and a teddy bear nearly half her size. Emily startled. You came again? Alexander set the items on the table, slipping off his coat, moving with a calmness as though this had become routine. Hospital food isn't worth much. I brought something decent, and I thought Chloe might need her first friend. He placed the teddy gently beside the crib, carefully adjusting its nose straight. Watching this powerful CEO, once the terror of boardrooms, fussing over a stuffed bear, Emily found the sight almost surreal. When the meal was set, Alexander pulled up a chair opposite her. Emily hesitated. Mr. Grant, I don't understand. Why are you doing all of this? Alexander didn't meet her gaze. He sliced bread slowly, his voice low and steady. Because I know what it feels like to lose everything in a hospital room. And I don't want anyone to go through that alone again. Emily fell silent. His words struck deep, touching a place in her heart she rarely allowed anyone near, yet raising questions she still wasn't ready to ask. Later that afternoon, Chloe began fussing, crying relentlessly, and refusing to feed. Emily nearly broke down, helpless and exhausted. The doctor had said a consultant wouldn't be available until the evening. Alexander, seated nearby with a stack of documents, looked up. Seeing Emily in distress, he immediately reached for his phone and dialed quickly. Hey, it's me. The baby won't latch. What do we do? Emily stared, wide-eyed. Moments later, Alexander bent toward her, relaying instructions with quiet patience. Try this position. It's called the football hold. Tuck her under your arm like cradling a ball. Clumsy at first, Emily followed, and miraculously, Chloe began to feed. Emily looked up, tears brimming, her eyes fixed on Alexander, as though seeing a stranger turn familiar. Not the cold CEO, but a man weathered by loss, now trying, through every means he knew, to create safety. Outside, drizzle misted the city, but inside that small hospital room, warmth spread quietly, and Emily thought, perhaps sometimes the strangers we never dare to rely on become the very anchors we need most. The days after childbirth slipped by like a winter storm. Emily left the hospital and returned to her tiny apartment, the same one that had once trapped her through endless nights of worry. But now she wasn't always alone. Every morning, a fresh bouquet appeared at her door. Sometimes a box of steaming food from a fine restaurant arrived just as she managed to put Chloe to sleep. And on occasion, Alexander Grant himself showed up, bringing another teddy bear or baby supplies Emily hadn't yet bought. She couldn't make sense of it. Why would a man as powerful and cold as Alexander step into the chaotic world of diapers and lullabies? A few weeks later, Emily returned to the office. She was startled to see her desk untouched, still neatly arranged. Even more surprising, her work schedule had been adjusted, flexible enough to let her work part-time from home. One evening, when most employees had already gone, Emily received a message from the assistant. Mr. Grant would like to see you in his office. Her heart raced as she entered the wide room, its glass walls overlooking the glowing city of Boston. Alexander stood with his back to her, hands in his pockets, tall frame silhouetted against the window. He didn't turn immediately. His voice resonated, heavy, as if carrying an old secret. You wonder why I've been helping you, don't you? Emily swallowed hard, unable to answer. Alexander finally turned, and his eyes were different. Not the icy steel she had always known, but weary, pained, and startlingly human. He picked up a photo frame from his desk. Inside, a radiant young woman smiled, cradling a tiny newborn. This is my wife, Catherine. He paused, drawing a sharp breath. She died giving birth. The baby only lived a few hours. Emily froze, her heart tightening. That night, Alexander continued, voice breaking, I stood powerless, watching them both leave me. I swore I'd never set foot in a maternity ward again. I buried myself in work, convincing myself that money and power could drown the grief. But then, he lifted his gaze, locking onto hers. Your message pulled me back. It dragged the past into the present, and I knew, if I ignored it, I'd be adding one more ghost I could never escape. Emily's eyes filled with tears. Now she understood why Alexander had always been there, quietly, steadily. It wasn't just kindness. It was an old wound, still raw. Her voice trembled. I'm sorry for reopening your pain. Alexander shook his head, his gaze softening. No, Emily. You didn't hurt me. You gave me a chance not to fail someone again. And in that moment, Emily saw through the immaculate black suits, through the cold facade of a CEO. She saw only a man who had lost everything and was desperately trying to find meaning again. Time passed, and Emily slowly learned to balance work with the sacred weight of motherhood. Chloe grew day by day, her clear eyes sparkling like tiny stars. On late afternoons, Alexander still dropped by, sometimes with a bag of toys, sometimes just standing silently by the crib, watching the baby sleep. At times, he even helped Emily with small household tasks, gestures that chipped away at the cold exterior she once thought defined him. It felt as though life was finally settling. Until one morning, Emily received a letter. The handwriting was familiar. The name struck her heart like a blade. Ryan Miller, the man who once swore he loved her, then turned his back the moment he learned she was pregnant. The man who left her to face fear and pain alone in the delivery room. Emily's hands trembled as she opened the envelope. Emily, I know I was wrong. I left because I was afraid. After all, I wasn't ready to be a father. But these past months, I've thought about it endlessly. I want to see my child. I have a right. Please give me a chance. Rage and anguish flared together. A right? This man dared to speak of rights when he hadn't been there for a single moment of the suffering. 2 days later, Emily agreed to meet Ryan at a small cafe downtown. Her heart was heavy, but this was a conversation she could not avoid. Ryan arrived, still with the smile that had once disarmed her, though now laced with unease, stripped of confidence. He sat, trying to fill the silence with small talk, as if his disappearance had never happened. Emily said little. Instead, she placed a photo on the table. Chloe, round eyes wide, her innocent smile glowing. This is your daughter, Emily said coldly, but you were never there. You've never held her, not even once. Ryan's head bowed, his hands twisted together. I know. I regret everything. I want to make it right. Not just with her, with you, Emily. We can... Emily cut him off, voice sharp as steel. No. That door is closed. I don't need a man who only knows how to run away. And Chloe doesn't either. Ryan's face stiffened, shock flashing into a spark of anger. I'm her father. I have rights. Emily gripped her coffee cup, eyes locking onto his with unwavering force. Rights don't come from blood. Rights come from being there, from protecting and loving. Things you never did. The cafe air grew heavy, silence settling thick between them. Ryan looked away, shame flickering behind his eyes, though pride kept him from breaking. Emily knew this was only the beginning of a larger battle. Not just legal, but of loyalty, trust, and the fight to protect Chloe. As she stepped outside, the cold Boston wind whipped around her. Emily paused, then caught sight of a familiar figure in the distance. Alexander Grant. He didn't enter the cafe. He simply leaned against his car, posture steady, gaze fixed firmly in her direction. No words were needed. Emily understood. While Ryan had only ever abandoned, Alexander, the man who once was a stranger, was now the unshakable wall, standing ready to face whatever storm came for her and Chloe. That evening, as the city lights began spilling over Boston's long streets, Emily returned home with tear-stained eyes. Ryan had reopened old wounds, leaving her both angry and drained. But as she stepped out of the taxi, she saw Alexander waiting at her apartment door, his crisp shirt replacing the usual power suit. He didn't ask questions. Instead, he quietly handed her a tissue. Emily clutched it, and fresh tears welled up. He wants to come back, she whispered hoarsely. Wants to see Chloe. But Ryan doesn't even know what being a father means. Alexander was silent for a long moment, his gaze deep and steady. Emily, I can't make this choice for you. But I do know this. Being a father isn't about a title. It's about showing up no matter the circumstances. His words struck her. Over the past months, it was Alexander who had cradled Chloe in those fragile first nights, who brought formula, who called for advice, who appeared quietly with thoughtful gifts. Each detail was small, but weighty enough that she could no longer ignore it. Days later, when the three of them, Emily, Alexander, and Chloe, took a walk in the park, they looked like a real family. Alexander pushed the stroller, his face serious yet gentle, eyes scanning even the faintest breeze that might chill Chloe. A group of children dashed past, jostling the stroller. Emily gasped in panic, but Alexander instantly stepped forward, steadying the handle and leaning down to calm Chloe before she could burst into tears. In that moment, Emily no longer saw him as a cold CEO, but as a shield, solid and warm. That night, as Emily lay Chloe down to sleep, she blurted softly, "Alexander, do you know? After Ryan left, I lost faith in all men. But you—" Alexander looked up, and for once the guarded eyes softened. "Emily, I'm not here to replace anyone. I just want to make sure you and your daughter never have to be alone again." It wasn't a grand declaration, nor a demand, but a promise so genuine it made her chest tighten. And in her heart, the contrast became undeniable. Ryan, the man who ran when challenges came. Alexander, the man who stepped forward even when it was never his burden to bear. That stark difference carved a truth deep within Emily. Chloe deserved a role model like Alexander, not the shadow of a man like Ryan. Autumn in Boston, red leaves scattered along the streets, crisp winds in the air. Yet inside Emily's small kitchen, golden light wrapped everything in warmth. Chloe babbled in her high chair, her bright eyes like two little stars. Emily cooked with a quiet smile, and Alexander walked in carrying a paper bag of small groceries. No longer the cold CEO, he appeared simple, like a man who belonged to this home. After dinner, Alexander grew uncharacteristically quiet. Then he pulled out a velvet box and sank to one knee right there on the kitchen floor. "Emily Carter." His voice was deep, but it trembled faintly. "I once lost everything. I once believed this heart had no room left for a home, but you and Chloe have shown me. Family isn't only about blood, it's about choice, about love, and about courage. Let me be the man who protects the two of you for the rest of my life." Emily's hand flew to her mouth, trembling. Tears welled, but this time they were tears of joy. Baby Chloe, curious, reached out her tiny hand to touch the sparkling ring. "Yes, Alexander," Emily choked out, "I will." The little kitchen filled with laughter and happy tears. An embrace, a promise, and the birth of a new family, born from a misplaced message on a stormy night, between two souls who once were strangers. Reflection. The beauty of this ending doesn't lie in perfection, but in the process of healing. Ryan chose to walk away. Alexander chose to step forward. Emily once lost all faith, but found the courage to open her heart to a new chance. Chloe, the innocent child, became the invisible bridge that brought two broken adults together. The kitchen proposal, simple yet sincere, became the emotional climax. Not about dazzling diamonds or fancy restaurants, but about the raw honesty of a man who had known loss, finally rediscovering faith in love and family. Lessons: family is a choice, not just blood. Ryan shared DNA, but not responsibility. Alexander had no blood ties, yet became the true foundation. Courage to face the past is the first step to healing. Alexander dared to confront the grief of losing his wife and child, and only then could he step toward the future. Mistakes don't have to define us. Emily once fell, once broke under the weight of failed love, but instead of staying imprisoned by pain, she rose, defending herself and her daughter. The greatest love is presence. No promise is more powerful than the act of showing up when it matters. And Alexander proved it, moment by moment, choice by choice.